The sun over Alaska didn't rise so much as it bled into the sky, a pale wound leaking light through ice fog. By the time Noah, Lila, and Kira reached the ridge overlooking the highway, the horizon had gone gold and white and cruel. The road to Anchorage's industrial quarter curved through the valley like a scar. Trucks moved below, small as beetles, their diesel fumes turning into ribbons of smoke that drifted up toward the ridge. Each one was tagged with the Northern Interior Logistics logo, the same mountain scar as on the crates in the mine. "Same supply chain," Lila murmured, adjusting her binoculars. "Same ghost signatures." Noah crouched beside her, rubbing the bridge of his nose. He hadn't slept in 36 hours. His breath came out like fog against the cold. "Let's make sure they're not moving anything we can't unsee." Kira whined softly, tail low. The dog's fur was stiff with frost, but her eyes burned clear amber. Noah reached out and brushed snow from her neck. "She knows something's wrong," he said quietly. "She's smarter than both of us combined," Lila replied. They watched the convoy for several minutes before Lila spoke again. "There's a pattern," she said, pointing. "Every third truck, no registration, no heat trace from the driver's cab. They're automated, self-driving, running on internal code. Which means someone doesn't want human eyes on what's inside." Noah's jaw tightened. "Then we follow." They tailed the convoy from a distance, snow chains crunching under the truck's rhythm. The air temperature dropped another 5 degrees, turning breath into crystal. The road narrowed until the convoy peeled off toward an abandoned industrial park, rusted cranes, silent warehouses, and the smell of oil frozen in time. Lila checked the tablet again. "This is Bear Street," she said. "And there, door 4, blue lift." The warehouse sat squat and wide at the end of the lot, its loading bay light flickering weakly. A half-buried sign read, "Anchor Bay Storage, authorized personnel only." Kira's hackles rose. Noah felt it through her leash before he even saw movement. A guard tower near the east corner, 2 figures silhouetted against the dying light. "2 on watch," he whispered. "We move when the wind shifts." They waited. The wind came like a gift, sharp, loud, covering sound. Noah and Lila sprinted low across the open ground. Snow kicked up behind them in silver plumes. Kira bounded ahead, muscles smooth and silent. At the loading bay, Noah found the keypad crusted with ice. He blew warm air on it and scraped with his glove until the numbers showed. "Same pattern," he murmured. 2468. The light blinked red, then green. "Déjà vu," Lila said. They slipped inside. The warehouse interior was a cathedral of shadows. Pallets of crates stretched into the dark, each marked with numbers that made no sense until you saw the rhythm in them. An encryption disguised as inventory. The hum of generators vibrated underfoot. Kira moved ahead, nose twitching, paws barely making sound. She stopped near one stack of crates and let out a single low growl. Noah knelt beside her, pried open the lid of the nearest crate. Inside wasn't ore or weapon parts, it was paper. Thousands of sheets stacked and sealed in plastic. Lila pulled one out. Her gloved fingers shook. They weren't manifests. They were names, pages and pages of them. Soldiers, agents, contractors. Every line ended with a status code, MIA, KIA, or redirected. And at the bottom of the last page, reigns Noah J. Status, terminated. Asset redeployed, DY22. Lila swallowed. Redeployed? Noah stared at the word until it stopped making sense. "They didn't kill us," he said slowly. "They recycled us." He reached deeper into the crate. Beneath the pages lay a metal device the size of a shoebox, smooth, black, humming faintly. A Dynetech tag gleamed on its side. Neural Interface Unit, Prototype 3B. This is what they put in the shepherd dogs, he whispered. This links mind to command net. Lila's voice dropped to a whisper. Noah, are you saying DY22 isn't just a project? He nodded. It's a collection. People, dogs, machines, anything loyal that could be programmed to obey. Kira whined, stepping back from the crate. Her body trembled. Noah reached to steady her, and then her head snapped up. A sound, soft, metallic, footsteps. He looked toward the far end of the warehouse. A figure emerged from the dark, tall, calm, familiar. Noah froze. No! The man wore an Arctic parka, hood down. His face was pale, cut with the same lines Noah remembered from a lifetime ago. Cole Hawkins, Noah breathed. Lila gasped. Your teammate? He died in the ambush. Hawkins smiled faintly, as if the word died were a polite exaggeration. That's what they told you. Hawkins stepped closer, boots crunching frost. His eyes gleamed, wrong somehow. Not glassy, not human exactly, but lit from within like the Canine clones. They rebuilt me, he said softly. And I remembered everything. The cold, the tree, your voice on the radio saying you'd come back for us. Noah's voice cracked. What did they do to you? They made me efficient, Hawkins said. You should have seen the test runs, Noah. We don't break anymore. We don't question orders. We don't freeze. You're not you. Hawkins's smile faltered for a second, then steadied again. Maybe not, but you shouldn't have come here. Marrow knows. He's watching right now. Lila lifted her pistol. Tell him we're done running. Hawkins didn't move. His gaze shifted to Kira. She was meant to be decommissioned. You kept her alive. Noah stepped between them. You touch her, and we find out how efficient you really are. A faint laugh escaped Hawkins. Still the same, brother. He dropped a small object onto the floor. It clattered once, then began to beep. Noah didn't think. He grabbed Lila and threw her behind the nearest crate. Kira dove with them. The grenade went off in a flash of blue light, not an explosion, an electromagnetic pulse. The lights died, the generators coughed, every screen went black. Noah's vision swam. His ears rang. Somewhere in the dark, Hawkins' voice echoed, distorted and broken. They'll find you. The frost remembers its names. Then silence. When Noah's sight cleared, Hawkins was gone. Only his footprints remained, glowing faintly blue under residual static. Lila's voice came shakily. EMP, we're blind. Not blind, Noah said. Just forced to remember. He fumbled in his pack, pulled out a flare, and struck it. Red light flooded the space, painting the walls with trembling shadows. The names in the papers shimmered under the light. Thousands of souls caught between truth and deletion. Lila whispered, We have to get this out. This is proof. Noah nodded, jaw set. We'll burn the snow if we have to. They made it out through a side door, the cold biting like teeth. The sky had turned to iron. Snow began to fall again, slow, deliberate, as if the world itself were erasing what had happened. At the edge of the lot, Noah turned back once. The warehouse loomed behind them, its windows glowing faintly with residual blue light. Cole's alive, he said quietly. No, Lila said. Something wearing him is. He didn't argue. He couldn't. Kira pressed close to his leg, head low, her breath ragged. When Noah knelt beside her, she looked up at him with eyes full of pain and memory. She knew him, Noah said softly. She recognized his scent. Lila put a hand on his shoulder. Then he's not completely gone. Maybe that's how we reach him. Maybe, Noah said, but not tonight. They turned toward the horizon where the city lights bled faint gold through the storm. Their tracks stretched behind them, already fading. Hours later, they made camp in the ruins of a ranger's cabin. The walls were half collapsed, the roof sagging, but the fireplace still worked. Lila sat near the flames, warming her hands. Noah leaned against the wall, staring at the flicker through Kira's fur. Shepherd, redeploy, DY-22. He said the words like puzzle pieces. They made us parts in something bigger. Lila looked at him. Then we take it apart. Noah nodded slowly. Tomorrow we start with marrow. Kira shifted in her sleep, paws twitching. Her tail thumped once, twice, like a heartbeat, or a signal from somewhere deep under the frost. Outside, the snow fell quietly. The kind of snow that covers blood, but never the truth. Anchorage wore stormlight like an old bruise. By late afternoon, the sky had sunk to a low pewter lid, and the city's edges blurred under blowing snow. The federal courthouse stood on its hill of concrete and conviction, windows lit in rows like teeth. Noah, Lila, and Kira moved against the wind across the plaza, a trinity of breath and purpose. Chain of custody, Lila said, patting the flat pelican case under her parka. Ledger scans, the neural interface unit, route tokens, warehouse photos. It's enough to punch daylight through DY-22. Daylight helps, Noah said, but storms make their own rules. Kira ranged a half step ahead, reading the crowd, the security guards hunched against cold, a knot of protesters with handmade signs, a news van shouldering into a drift. As they reached the metal detectors, a marshal glanced down and lifted a brow at the dog. She's service, Noah said, and smarter than most counsel. The marshal huffed something like a laugh and waved them through. Inside, heat peeled the ice from their coats in glittering flakes. Fluorescent light washed the corridors, as if truth were a surface you could sterilize. Lila guided Noah to an office on the second floor with a glass door that read, Assistant U.S. Attorney, Alma Duarte. Through the glass, a woman with steel gray hair and a posture that wouldn't bend for God or gravity was scribbling on a legal pad. Duarte didn't look up when they entered. If you're selling miracles, she said, you're late. Evidence, Leela replied, sliding the case onto the desk. And a problem wearing a contractor's face. Duarte capped her pen and finally looked. Her eyes were sharp enough to nick. Dr. Chen, Mr. Raines. She nodded at Kira. And the witness I'm most likely to believe. Noah cracked the case, laid out the work, the sat phone, the ledger pages, the Dynetech box humming faintly as if it remembered commands. Duarte listened, hands folded, eyes moving like a judge weighing a life. When he mentioned Hawkins, she flinched. It was small, but it lived. If a witness is repurposed, she said carefully, we need corroboration that can't be argued into smoke. Lila slid over a thumb drive. Route tokens, a pointer labeled Anshore Bear, video of door 4, and a list of names. Her mouth tightened. They wrote him redeployed. Duarte drew a slow breath. We've suspected a carve-out like DY-22, but suspicion is for coffee rooms. This. She touched the stack as if it might bite. This is court. A knock. A deputy entered, snow steaming off his shoulders. Ma'am, marshals are fielding weird traffic. Power company reports instability downtown. Grid fluctuations like someone's leaning on the switch. Duarte's gaze ticked to the window, toward the low sky and the lines that stitched city to power. We'll move fast, she said, returning to the table. Emergency evidentiary. Hearing. Judge Klein will see what he can be made to see. She looked at Noah. You willing to be sworn? I've already been, Noah said. Different altar. They were barely seated in courtroom 3 by dusk. The benches creaked under winter coats. The flag hung still. Judge Klein entered with the tired dignity of a man who has seen most kinds of weather and decided to remain furniture anyway. He looked over the docket, looked at Duarte, then at the defense table where two suits arranged their faces into skepticism. "We have a storm," he said, "and you have an emergency." Duarte rose. "Your Honor, this is a motion to impound and seal evidence pending grand jury review, and to issue temporary restraining orders against Northern Interior Logistics, Dynetech Holding subsidiaries, and any federal carve-outs operating under the label DY22. The suits murmured. Klein pinched the bridge of his nose. "Carve-outs. I've lived to see the day we litigate ghosts." He flicked his eyes to Noah. "Mr. Raines, you're the witness?" "Yes, sir." "Step up." Noah swore in, voice steady. Kira lay at his boots, head on paws, eyes sweeping the room. The storm pressed a palm against the windows, testing the seams. Duarte took him through the spine of the story without wasting cartilage. Ambush, cedar, Kira's rope work, the truck, the sat phone, the outpost, the anchor warehouse, Hawkins. With each fact, she placed an exhibit, and with each exhibit, the courtroom felt less like a theater and more like a room where the floor could hold weight. When she set the neural interface box on the evidence cart, a murmur passed like a draft. The defense rose. "Objection, Your Honor. Foundation as to what that device is." Duarte's chin lifted a millimeter. "We will lay foundation through Dr. Chen." Klein nodded. "Proceed." Lila testified in sentences that landed like nails. Procurement trails, firmware hashes, the message, frost bind. She spoke tech the way a farmer names weather, not to impress, but to survive it. The defense tried a sneer about speculative cyber inferences, but Klein cut it off with a look that suggested he'd been raised by grandmothers and would brook no disrespect for useful work. Duarte slid the ledger pages into the record. "And the names, Your Honor." The storm chose that moment to gutter the lights. They flickered, dimmed, came back. The bailiff glanced toward the ceiling like a prayer. "Get the power company on the line," Klein told the clerk. "I don't care if you have to call their mother." The defense seized the lull. "Your Honor, all this alleged evidence is derivative of a break-in. The warehouse was private property leased by a logistics firm, fruit of the poisonous—" The lights died. Not a flicker, a stop. The room exhaled as one organism. Emergency panels coughed up red along the baseboards. Somewhere distant, a generator tried and failed. Outside, the wind's voice got louder, the way a liar's does when the microphone cuts. A door at the back of the courtroom opened. Snow came in on boots and orders. A man in a black parka with a little too much confidence stepped into the red glow like a stage he'd booked. He wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't a deputy. He wore his smile like an old scar. Silas Marrow removed a glove as if undressing a threat. "Apologies, Judge," he said, voice mild enough to cut. "Grid's a mess tonight. I thought I'd save us time." The bailiff moved, but two men in contractor grays were already in the aisles, hands near jackets, professionalism slick as oil. Klein's face didn't move. "Mr. Marrow, if you take one more step, you'll learn how quickly contempt can be measured." Marrow put both hands up, each empty, palms lit red. "No need for heat. I've come to help." Duarte's laugh was winter. "You don't own this room." "I own very little," Marrow said. "I lease talent. I rent corridors. I clean up after programs too ambitious to live under their own names." He tipped his head at the exhibits. "And I recycle efficiently." Noah felt Kira's body harden against his boot. Marrow's eyes landed on him and brightened like a lab result. "Mr. Raines, the man who refuses to die. You're either stubborn or adaptable." DY22 likes both. DY22 eats what it can't earn, Noah said. Marrow's gaze slid to the neural interface unit. He clucked his tongue. You found one of the old toys. Dog collars for the loyal. We've improved them. He glanced at Kira. Some models resist. The bailiff's hand sat on his holster now. The contractors smiled in ways that said they'd rehearsed this posture in mirrors. The red baseboard lights cast everyone into the same color, a democracy of blood. Klein spoke like a gavel. Mr. Marrow, you have 30 seconds to leave before I teach your men about jurisdiction using an anatomy lesson. Ms. Duarte, proceed with your motion. Clerk, get me a pen that writes in the dark. Of course, Marrow said, bowing like a man doing math in his head and liking the sum. One last courtesy, then. He reached into his coat. Kira launched. She reached him before anyone remembered breath. Her body hit his thigh like a verdict, teeth bared, eyes bright with that old river light that had pulled Noah out of black water years ago. A contractor yelped and drew. Noah was already moving. Don't, he snapped, voice so flat it sounded like weather. His pistol pointed at the floor, but his eyes did not. Nobody shoots. Marrow didn't fight. He stood very, very still, hands spread, dog anchored to his leg by the authority of her jaw. Easy, Noah murmured. Kira. Her ears flicked. She released, stepped back, growled without theater. The red lights stuttered. Somewhere outside, a transformer gave up. Marrow looked down at the tooth marks in his wool with academic interest. Good girl, he said, softly, without mockery. True loyalty has to be earned, not coded. Leave, Duarte said. Now. He took one slow step back, palm still open. You can win tonight, he said to the room. You can even sign papers, but you can't prosecute a storm. Programs like DY22 aren't crimes to be indicted. They're weather systems. You don't jail weather. You endure it or you learn to sail. Or, Noah said, you cut its power. He held Marrow's eyes until something unperformed passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or a note two instruments can both play. Then Marrow backed to the doors, his men retreating with him. The heavy wood swallowed them, then thumped under the wind. Half a minute later, the lights returned in an ugly white blast that made everyone squint like waking. The heater coughed to life. A collective laugh broke and died. Nobody trusted it. Klein didn't smile. Ms. Duarte, he said evenly, your orders are granted. Impound, seal, TROs across the board. I'm assigning armed marshals to escort this evidence to a federal facility not leased to ghosts. Mr. Rains, Dr. Chen, do not leave the building without 3 bodies between you and the weather. He signed in a tight script that feared nothing but sloppiness. The clerk stamped. The sound was sweeter than choir. As the courtroom emptied, defense muttering, press sniffing for headlines that wouldn't fit on screens. Noah felt the backs of his knees go weak. He knelt so he wouldn't sway. Kira nudged his jaw with her muzzle. I'm here, he whispered into her fur. I know. They walked the corridor toward the evidence room, under a guard phalanx that felt like an apology. Duarte peeled off to brief marshals. Lila fell in beside Noah, fingers tapping restless code against her thigh. Marrow didn't come to lose, she said. He came to measure. Then let him bring a ruler, Noah said. We'll break it. They were 20 steps from the secure door when the building trembled. Not power, not wind, something closer. A hum that rose past hearing and back down again, felt more than heard. Kira froze. Her head turned toward the stairwell. A woman in an FBI windbreaker stumbled out, face pale, hand clamped to her side. Blood seeped between her fingers like a slow red glove. "Help," she said in a voice that belonged to people who'd been taught not to say that. "They're in the generator room. They're—" A second figure poured out of the stairwell behind her, contractor gray, pistol up, sighting over her shoulder at the world. He saw Noah, saw the marshals, and did the worst math of his life. He fired. The round should have taken the agent in the spine. It didn't. Kira moved like a decision. She shouldered the woman aside and took the bullet along the line of her ribs. The sound it made, the wet slap of metal redirected by muscle and miracle, will live a long time in Noah's skull. Everything after that happened in the quick, choreographed way of practiced crisis. The nearest marshal put the contractor into the wall with 3 steady shots. Lila caught the agent under the arms and dragged her behind the column. Duarte appeared from nowhere with gauze and orders. Noah hit his knees beside Kira and felt the world unmake itself around a wound. "Stay," he told her, fingers already pressing, his voice so calm it frightened him. "Right here, Kira, with me." She licked his wrist, eyes clear, breath quick. Blood oozed and slowed under his hands. He could smell the copper and the cleaner they used on courthouse floors and the cold that still lived in their coats. The agent blinked up at him, face bone pale. "They were going to blow the backup," she said hoarsely. "I tried." She swallowed. "I'm Emily Vale." "Emily, I'm Noah," he said without looking away from his dog. "You did good. You're still doing good. Breathe." Her eyes skittered to Kira. She chose you," he said. "So we will too." A medic team slid in like choreography with wheels and clamps. Lila's hands were steady on the pressure. Duarte snapped at a marshal. "Lock the plant. Bring me whoever breathes near a wire." Kira's breath hitched and settled. Noah felt the tremor of pain pass through her like a wave through muscle. He moved his hand to keep pressure and to let his palm rest over her heart. It was there. It stayed. The medic looked at him. "We need to move the dog. You'll move me too," Noah said, not looking for permission. They went as a unit down the hall in a ridiculous holy procession: gurney, medkit, dog, man, woman, law. At the service elevator, the lights hiccuped again, and the medic swore like prayer. "Stairs," he said. "We've got it." Lila caught Noah's shoulder. "Go," she said. "I'll ride the evidence. Duarte will send marshals with me." He nodded. There was nothing else to do that wouldn't lie. Find where Marrow leaned on the grid. "I'm already looking," she said, eyes gone to war. The stairwell was a wind tunnel of bad air and echo. Emily Vale's breath rasped behind them. "Why?" she asked the wall more than him. "Because storms test who we are," Noah said, "and because she thinks you're worth the bullet." They reached the basement, where an improvised triage had grown out of carts and conviction. The medic slid Kira onto a table, irrigated, assessed. Through and through along the rib, no lung, lucky. "Not luck," Noah said. Her aim. He stepped back, because men step back when professionals need a square foot more gravity. He braced his hand on the cool cinder block and finally let his breath come ragged. The world narrowed to the sound of clamps, and Kira's stubborn heart insisting on its next beat. Emily Vale eased down on a chair, color crawling back into her cheeks. "I was supposed to escort a witness," she said. "The call came from my SAC. Then the route changed on the way in. I smelled it too late." "DY-22 has fingers on phones," Noah said. "We'll cut them." "They'll come for the evidence," she whispered. "They already did," Duarte said from the doorway, snow in her hair like salt. "And lost." She looked at Kira, softened in a way that would get her in trouble with no one but herself. I'll put a deputy in a chair by that dog who won't blink." A marshal jogged in, breath clouding. "Judge signed the transport order. We move in 10. Backup gen is secured." Duarte nodded. To Noah, "You riding with us or staying with her?" He didn't pretend to consider. "With her," he said. "Send Lila with the truck. If Marrow tries to edit the story again, she'll notice the typo." Duarte's mouth quirked. "I do love a good proofreader." She left in a hurricane of competence. The medic finished the wrap and gave Noah the kind of look that men learn on ships and in battle. "Yes, it's bad. No, it won't own us." "You can talk to her now," he said. Noah stepped to the table and put his forehead to Kira's, the way he had the night by the cedar when the world decided not to keep him. "Still here," he whispered. "Because you decided." Her tail thumped once. Somewhere upstairs, the storm ran its knuckles along the windows again, but the lights held. He looked at Emily Vale. "You owe a dog," he said. "I owe a life," she answered. "No difference," he said. In the loading bay, 10 minutes later, marshals rolled 2 crates into an armored truck, one humming faintly, one heavy with paper. Lila climbed in, jaw set, eyes already hunting patterns in the night. Noah watched the doors thud shut and felt that familiar mixture that men feel when they can't be in 2 places at once. Fear, trust, prayer. The truck pulled into snow that decided to be not just weather, but a test. Red and blue lights ghosted across the walls. The bay door rattled down. Noah returned to the triage room where Kira slept under drugs and duty. He pulled up a metal stool and sat. "Long night," Emily said. "The longest," he said, "but morning's come." He rested a hand on Kira's shoulder and let the storm talk to the building. Some nights the only victory is to keep breath moving from one person to another, from dog to man, from witness to truth. This would be one of those nights. Snow learned our names that night, not the tidy legal ones trapped on ledger paper, but the short names breath makes when your throat is raw and you're still running. By the time the armored truck cleared the courthouse ramp, Anchorage was a bowl of light drowned under gray. Lila rode in the back with 2 marshals in the crates, one humming Dyne-Tech, one heavy with pages that could tilt a country. She kept a glove on the neural unit, like you'd keep a hand on a sleeping child's back. "Steady," she whispered, though the box had no ears. "Convoy route?" she asked. "North spur to the parks, then west cut," the senior marshal said. "Storm doors at mile 18 if the grid goes stupid again." "Grid is already stupid," Lila muttered, tapping a window. "Assume eyes on us." They rolled past plow stacks and shuttered diners. The radio hissed weather, and then Almeida, one of Duarte's, cut through. "Unit 1, you've got a shadow 2 blocks back. Gray Tahoe, no plates." The marshal checked his mirror. "Copy." Lila opened her laptop on battery miser mode and watched a map that didn't deserve her trust. A dot a block behind them mimicked their turns like a bad punchline. She felt the tickle at the base of her skull that meant code was nearby, humming like a bee that didn't believe in flowers. "DY-22 loves remote hands," she said. "Expect a lane closure that wasn't there 10 minutes ago." "Roger that. We'll take the Ridge Road." Ridge is worse for snow. Better for sight lines. Outside, the city thinned to warehouses, then trees. The road climbed into a switchback ribbon cut into the shoulder of the Chugach, snowbanks higher than headlights, spruce bowing under the weight. The Tahoe kept respectful distance, the way a wolf will pace you without spending calories. Lila texted Noah. "Ridge route, shadow on us." The dots turned to delivered. She pictured him in a fluorescent basement with Kira's heartbeat under his hand and a medic's voice saying good or lucky or both. The truck hit mile 14 and the world changed. Snow didn't fall from the sky anymore. It blew sideways, ground up by wind into smoke. The lead marshal leaned into the glass as if that might bend physics. Visibility 3 car lengths. If we lose the shoulder, we... The radio screamed feedback. Then a flat voice. Unit 1, stop. Repeat, stop. Slide risk increased. Risk is always increased, the marshal said, foot easing off the gas. We creep. Do not, the voice began, and then the mountain spoke. It doesn't sound like thunder. It sounds like a wall finding out it's a river. The first fracture ripped across the slope to their left, a white seam unzipping stitch by stitch. Snow below it shivered, then liquefied. The marshal didn't swear. He did something worse. He went very quiet. Hold on, he said, and put the truck into a controlled prayer. The slide came down in tears, slow at first, then with the greedy acceleration of anything that has learned it can win. It hit the road 50 yards ahead and rolled over the guard posts like bread dough swallowing raisins. Reverse, Lila said, already bracing the crates. Road behind? The driver asked the mirror. The Tahoe behind them had chosen that moment to discover the limits of rear-wheel drive. It fishtailed across both lanes, blocking the retreat. Lila saw faces, contracts and cold, inside it. She didn't see weapons, but she saw men who believed in their luck. Hold, the marshal said again, not to the slide, to his own hands. He backed them to the least wrong angle and let the avalanche pour until it decided it was bored. The radio tried again through static. Second slide predicted. Crown fracture above mile 13. If you are between them, we are, Lila said. Seek higher ground. The slope on the right rose like a shoulder out of the road cut. There was no higher ground that didn't involve climbing into wind with crates that weighed more than arguments. The marshal eyed the turnout 20 yards back, a plow lot shoveled clean yesterday by a man who believed in tomorrows. We make the lot, he said. They did, barely. The Tahoe jumped forward like a surprised animal and slid into the new pile, nose first, men bailing out with that loose run people do when they've never fallen properly. Lila watched them and knew the math. Not a hit team. A follow team waiting for a hit that hadn't arrived yet, which meant the hit was for the mine. Marrow's erasing sources, she said into the cab. He'll bury the shaft, make it look like a mercy slide. The marshal keyed the radio. Courthouse, this is Unit 1. Avalanche on ridge, holding in plow lot. Request additional units and a rescue call for mile 20, Old Mine Road. The radio coughed and delivered Noah's voice, rough with running. Lila. Here, she said. Stay put, he said. They're going to knock the mountain. We're 15 out. We. Me, Kira, and an agent who refuses to die quietly. Emily Vale's voice came faint behind his. Protocols are for days with sun. Sirens bled under the words. Lila closed her eyes for half a beat and let the cocktail of fear and faith settle where it needed to. Copy, she said. We'll keep the gospel. The what? Emily asked. Never mind, Lila said. Just hurry. At the courthouse loading bay, the world had learned to breathe again. The medic let Kira stand on her own, a careful test. She bore weight, rib-taped, breath deep. Noah checked her eyes and found dawn in them. You're not cleared for heroics, the medic said. Define heroics, Noah said, clipping the harness. Kira leaned into his leg as if to say, define later. Emily Vale had color back and a bandage of her own under the windbreaker. She held out keys, the Ranger Unit's Tahoe. "I should be on desk after NOIS," she said, "but I'm not that kind of should." Duarte met them at the door, breath blowing white like a censure and a blessing. "Transport's holding. Klein ordered Doe T to freeze the mine road, but the state got there late. If Marrow lights that slope, he'll take out the shaft and whatever men he sent to wash the scene." "His own?" Emily said. "He likes clean margins," Duarte said. "Do what you do. Bring me the truth alive." "Copy," Noah said. They drove into weather that had decided to audition for a part it already had. The wipers worked like men on old oars. Kira stood braced, eyes forward, every motion calculated into stillness. Emily took the switchbacks clean and mean. She'd done this dance before, and the mountain could feel it. At mile 17, the scanner caught a ranger channel. Ward's men. A voice Noah didn't know said, "Charges heard above the shaft. We've got 2 deputies trapped near the outflow culvert, snow collar building." "Keep them breathing," Noah said into a mic he didn't own. "We're 3 out." "Identify," the voice snapped. "Ghost," Noah said. A pause. "Copy, Ghost." Emily didn't smile exactly, but something like it tugged at the corner of her mouth. "You have a brand." "Not that kind," Noah said. They cut left onto the mine road, which had been a road yesterday and was now a suggestion. Limbs arched under the weight into a cathedral of black lines. The sky above them was white without depth, like looking into a wound too close to see its edges. The first slide had already rewritten the grade ahead. Snow lay across it in a piled grammar of slabs and dust. A ranger truck sat skewed in the ditch, hazard lights brave and foolish. A deputy with ice in his eyebrows waved them hard left, where someone had cut steps with a shovel and a prayer. "2 down there," he said, not wasting words on greeting. "1 femur, 1 buried to chest. Culvert is breathing. If the second crown goes, it may take the whole collar." "How long?" Emily asked. "Longer than we have." Noah looped Kira's lead to his belt and took the steps down the cut. The culvert mouth below was a black oval where snow fed into the mine's old drainage. In front of it, an island of ice and logs, a ruin from last breakup, had trapped debris, and today, men. The first deputy's leg lay wrong, but his eyes were too busy living to care. The second had snow to the armpits, face gray with the precise fear that comes from not being able to lift your own ribs. "We're here," Noah said, and meant more than the grammar. He took the shovel from the ranger and went to work with a speed that wasn't frantic because frantic wastes heat. Emily slid in beside him with that federal way of doing calm. Kira ranged the edge, head high, reading the slope and the air, ears catching sounds that belonged to snow, not men. "Another slide coming," the buried deputy rasped. "Maybe," Noah said, "but this breath is yours." He cut a trench along the man's torso, using the shovel more like a spoon than a blade. Emily supported the head, gloved fingers finding the neck to talk to the carotid. The femur man gritted into a stick and then relaxed because men relax when other hands decide to carry. A low, sick roar moved through the trees above, a sound like a cough the size of a hill. Kira's ears stabbed forward. She turned and barked once, sharp as a whistle. Noah didn't look up. Looking up doesn't stop snow. "Almost," he said. They freed the chest, then the waist. The deputy's breath expanded for the first time in minutes and turned his face human again. "I thought," he started. "Later," Emily said, and meant it kindly. The slope above shook its head and let go. The second crown fracture released small at first, a slough like flour off a baker's board, and then, finding luck, decided to be bolder. The new slide charged the gully with less mass than the first, but more speed. It aimed directly for the culvert mouth, and the men knelt foolishly in front of it. "Now," Noah said, not loudly, and pulled. Emily and the ranger heaved the buried deputy onto a drag tarp they hadn't had a second to unfold properly. The femur man tried to help and realized no one wanted that. Kira leapt onto the wrong side of the tarp. Noah's no came too late, and dug her nails in, adding 50 pounds of understood traction. They hauled for the makeshift steps, boots punching through crust, snow grabbing ankles, time racing gravity, and winning by stumbles. The slide poured into the culvert with a percussive rush that thundered inside the pipe and boomed back up like a giant laughing. The collar collapsed where their knees had been 4 heartbeats earlier, and the air filled with that crystalline dust that makes everything a dream you don't want. They made the lip. Men reached down with arms like rigging and yanked them to the relative grammar of the road. Someone clapped someone, and someone cursed in thanks, and someone cried without sound. The mountain breathed out. "Count," Noah said. "2 deputies," the ranger answered, hand to each shoulder. 1 ghost, 1 fed, 1 hero. Kira shook snow off in a heavy halo that caught the failure of light. She panted, tongue bright, eyes never leaving Noah's. He scratched the good side of her ribs and found the tape still holding. "Not cleared for heroics," he murmured. She sneezed in dignified disagreement. "Where's the shaft?" Lila's voice cracked over the handheld like a person ditching a bad dream. "Noah." He keyed. "Collar flooded, culvert holding. Are you clear?" "Unit 1 in a plow lot," she said. "First slide cut the road. Tahoe boys dug themselves out. They're pretending to be hikers. I'm pretending to believe them." "Hold," Noah said. "We'll come." "No," she answered. "I'm coming to you." The decision made itself. Marshals chained tires and fetched ropes, and someone had coffee that tasted like gun oil and sugar. The ranger truck with the broken ego still ran. It would do. Emily's Tahoe would lead at 10 miles an hour because any faster was disrespect. They convoyed up the chopped steps of road to the ridge where the mine road broke into a wide shoulder the plows loved. That's where they met Hawkins. He stood in the road cut like a method that hadn't been tested yet. No rifle out. Only hands lifted, palms pale against the blue weather. Snow had found his lashes and made him look younger than the man whose body had walked into the warehouse. His eyes still held that wrong little glow like a biomedical joke that had been told too many times. "Don't shoot," he said, which is what people say when they know someone should. Marshals took positions because professionals don't need to be told. Emily set her feet the way training had taught her and put her hand just off the butt of her pistol. Kira leaned forward, hackles up, weight balanced, neither attack nor retreat, simply decision held taut. "Why?" Noah asked. The word had a dozen spare words inside it. Hawkins's mouth twitched. "Because I placed the last charge wrong," he said. "Because something in me didn't want the culvert to die when it could take men who were still moving." He looked past Noah to the tarp, to the face of the deputy now alive enough to hate the cold. "Because you came back." "What are you, Cole?" Noah said softly, finally using the first name he'd kept in a pocket, because to speak it would be to admit the hope. Hawkins tilted his head like a dog remembering a command. "I am efficient," he said. Then, lower. "And not all at once." Behind him, on the far slope, a pop answered a question no one had asked aloud. A shallow cornice dropped, sending a ribbon of snow across a side chute where no one stood. Hawkins flinched like a man who had expected a pain and not received it. Marrow? Emily asked. Gone to the other ridge, Hawkins said. He doesn't need to see blood. He only needs the ledger to drown. The ledger is in a truck with federal seals, Lila said, arriving out of the storm like a sentence you needed to hear. She climbed out of the plow lot truck, goggles up, face bright with cold and conviction, and in 12 places that don't care if the grid hiccups. Hawkins looked at her. For a second, the blue behind his pupils dimmed. Dr. Chen, he said, almost like memory. You taught me how to name variables. I taught you how to doubt, she said. Keep doing that. His gaze cut to Kira and steadied there. Whatever had been tuned inside the shepherd dogs hummed like wire between the two creatures. Kira didn't growl. She simply watched. Hawkins smiled with just one side of his mouth, the human way, and then took a small step back. Marrow will take door 4 to bear. Anchor, he said. He thinks in metaphors he can keep. He pointed to the horizon where the storm thickened. Warehouse by the shipyard won't hold him, but the barge will. A barge? Lila asked. Names are weather, Hawkins said. Roots are rivers. He'll move on water to wash prints. A marshal raised his hand like a student who had not signed up for poetry. We cuff him or what? Noah weighed the air. The part of him that believed in rules stretched one way. The part that had learned mercy in a river mouth pulled the other. Before he chose, Hawkins chose for him. He slid his hands down, slowly, and held them out wrists together like a man offering a fact. Take me, he said, but put me where Dynetech can't whisper through the walls. Lila stepped in, eyes narrow. He's hot, she told the marshals. EMP-proofed mesh for transport, and keep his hands visible. DY-22's toys like finger talk. They walked him to the truck and Kira walked behind, head even with his knee. Once, Hawkins glanced down at her and said, barely moving his lips, Good girl. She sneezed again, the polite Malinois insult. The radio flared. Duarte, storm window closing. If you've got bodies and brains, get them where paper lives. Judge is awake and mean. I like him that way. On our way, Lila said. They turned the convoy. The mountain had stopped trying to teach them and went back to being tall. Noah took the last glance down the draw where the shaft lay under new snow. The mine had been an open mouth. Now it was a scar. But scars tell better truths than wounds. On the way down, the Tahoe from earlier reappeared, this time honest in its need to pass. Two men inside held their hands up in exaggerated innocence as they slid by. One of them, the squeak parka from the yard, let his eyes dwell too long on the crate edges visible through Lila's truck door. He filed a thought he would not live to use if he stayed in this job. Door 4, Lila said to no one. Bear, anchor, barge. Tomorrow, Noah said. Tonight, she corrected, watching the storm. Kira laid her head on Noah's thigh and finally let exhaustion admit itself. He stroked the line of fur avoiding tape and felt a steady, stubborn beat under his hand. Avalanche gospel. Everything false falls. What remains is what can carry weight. They reached the courthouse as lights failed, and returned and failed and returned, like a man learning to forgive. Marshals hustled Hawkins through a door that had learned too many secrets. The deputies went to a clinic with hands on shoulders and the kind of laughter you hear at funerals right after the hymn. Emily Vale filled out a form that would birth 5 investigations and kill 3 careers. She signed without shaking. Duarte stood at the base of the stair like a conductor who has, at last, the right orchestra. You brought me evidence, a witness and living people, she said. You may keep your jobs. We don't have jobs, Lila said. Then keep your hands, Duarte replied. I'll need them. Noah looked toward the windows where the city tried to be brave. He thought about water and routes and barge schedules and a man who still called him brother from behind blue-lit eyes. He thought about marrow and anchors and the way storms love to hide in metaphors. Door 4, he said. Blue lift, Lila answered. Barge, Emily added. Gospel, Duarte said dryly, and for once didn't sound like she was making fun. Kira sneezed a final judgment on bureaucracy and curled at Noah's boots, finally asleep. The mountain had preached. The city would answer. Morning, if it came, would have to learn their names. Anchorage's shipyard wore the storm like a borrowed coat. Sodium lamps smeared halos in the blowing snow, and the cranes stood like iron clerics blessing the harbor with rusted hands. The signs Lila had been collecting, the ones that felt like metaphors until they weren't, stacked into a single arrow. Door 4, blue lift, barge. Bear anchor, Emily read off the peeling stencil on the chain link as they reached the perimeter. He really did name the hiding place after a riddle. Criminals are romantics with invoices, Lila said, shouldering her pack. He thinks poetry keeps him safe. Kira nudged Noah's knee, breath warm through the frost. She wasn't cleared for heroics. She came anyway. They moved along the fence where sea ice bucked against the pilings. Door 4 faced the water, a corroded rolling bay with a dent like a fist had tried to reason with it. Beside it, the blue freight lift shook in the wind, its cage dusted white, a frozen tongue of metal licking at the second floor. Up or through? Emily asked. Through, Noah said, working the rolling door's latch with gloved patience. The storm hissed disapproval. Metal squealed. Inside, the warehouse smelled like brine and ink. Pallets of drums sat in long aisles, each stamped with shipping codes that meant everything and nothing. Fertilizer if you squinted. Rare earth if you knew how to read the lie. Footfalls above. A radio cracking orders. 10 minutes, push with tide. Marrow will join on the slip. Barge window, Lila whispered. He'll ride the ebb to the outer bay, then transfer to a pilot skiff. Clean water, clean books. Kira's ears slashed forward. She trotted toward a stair scabbed with salt. Noah followed, hand on the rail, ribs still remembering last night's court. On the mezzanine, a door stood open to the gale. Through it, a catwalk ran to the blue lift and across to a loading arm that arched over the barge below, like a bridge to a story you shouldn't cross. Silas Marrow stood at the far end, coat flapping, gloves exact. He wasn't alone. 2 contractors at his flanks, one on a winch, another at a mooring line. His breath smoked, dignified. Marrow saw them and smiled as if he'd been waiting at a restaurant table and they were late. Mr. Raines, Dr. Chen, Agent Vale, the ghost brings friends. Friends bring warrants, Emily said, stepping into the wind. He glanced past them. No judge on the catwalk tonight. Duarte signed enough paper to pulp a forest, Lila said. You can quote it on your way down the ladder. Marrow's eyes warmed, not with kindness, but with interest. You mistake my destination. I'm going up the channel. He gestured to the barge, to the containers chained like safe deposit boxes the size of rooms. Evidence sinks, evidence sails, evidence evaporates when weather is persuasive. Your weather keeps killing people, Noah said. Not people, Marrow corrected gently. Outcomes, a necessary distinction in my field. Kira's growl arrived low and unperformed. It made the storm feel uninvited. Bring him back from the metaphor, Lila told Noah, eyes scanning, counting exits, clocks, mistakes. We need the body and the ledger intersecting in court, not in the bay. Noah stepped to the rail. You had a chance, he told Marrow. Walk away from ghosts. Let the names stay names. Marrow's smile thinned. We don't get to walk away. We only decide which corridor eats us. He tipped his chin toward the loading arm. Door 4 will be closed soon. Would you like to watch me win? Not tonight, a voice said from behind them. Hawkins. He moved out of the shadow of a stacking frame, with 2 marshals at his shoulders, like very polite wolves. They looked almost surprised he had asked to come, and more surprised that every step he took was one he didn't have to. His hands were cuffed in front. The blue behind his eyes had dimmed to a pilot light. Marrow's smile brightened again. Cole, did you bring me your confession? I brought you the thing that broke, Hawkins said. His gaze flicked to the loading arm controls, a box wired to the lift with a harness of cables, frost beaded on the buttons. You set your safeties wrong. Marrow spared the control box a glance full of contempt for imprecision. I hired men who could read weather. I did not hire poets. Poets notice hinges, Hawkins said softly. He stepped toward the box. The marshal stiffened. Noah lifted a palm. Wait. Kira's head tracked Hawkins's shoulders like a compass under a magnet. Hawkins didn't touch the panel. He pointed. You chained the secondary clutch to a manual override because the motor was binding. But your man looped the chain wrong. He flicked his eyes to the winch. If that chain slips when you load the forward container, the arm drops and torsions the lift. The cage will jam. If you're on it, you'll hang over the water, like an idea you didn't think through. For the first time, a precise, small line appeared between Marrow's brows. He looked at the chain. He looked back at Hawkins. And you're telling me this because... Hawkins breathed, and the exhale looked like a man remembering the shape his lungs were born to have. Because something in me is still inefficient. Lila's mouth quirked, grief and gratitude in the same muscle. Welcome back. Marrow's smile left. He lifted a hand. The winchman tightened the line. The barge drifted a foot, groaned against the fenders, tired and mean. We're past talk, Marrow said. Then let's move, Emily answered, because action is a language. Everything happened at once and in sequence, the way good endings do when the story has trained your eyes. A contractor reached inside his coat. A marshal's voice said don't at the exact same pitch Noah had used the night before. Kira launched, not at a man, but at the chain Marrow had mocked. Her jaws clamped on a loop that should never have been within a dog's height, and she yanked. Metal squealed. The loop skipped a tooth on the sprocket and bit into the right link instead of the wrong. The loading arm shuddered. The lift cage lurched half an inch, then caught true. Marrow blinked, annoyed at physics becoming opinionated. Now, Noah said, and ran. He didn't go for Marrow. He went for the cutoff, the red lever by the lift's base that would starve the motor of power and the arm of obedience. He hit it with the heel of his hand. The motor died into a hungry whine. The contractor finally found his courage and his gun. Emily found his wrist with a baton strike that turned his shot into a scream at the wind. A marshal cuffed him mid-profanity. The winchman looked to Marrow for orders and saw none. He ran and learned how catwalks punish hurry. Marrow didn't flee. He stepped forward instead, toward the barge edge, and rested his hand on the rail like a man greeting a friend. You can freeze pieces, he told Noah, as if resuming a pleasant conversation. You can embarrass evenings, but you cannot change the weather. DY-22 will not be tried in a room on a hill. It will be tried in 1,000 rooms you don't know exist. You built a maze, Noah said. We brought a dog. Kira held the chain until her jaw trembled, then released, tongue bright, eyes laughing at gravity. Hawkins moved without being told. He stepped to the control box and pulled the manual pins. The loading arm sighed and locked. For an instant, his face was all human. Marrow saw it. The slackening of the blue. He cocked his head, almost tender. "You're breaking, Cole." Hawkins met his gaze. "I'm choosing." Marrow's hand came up, a little remote, no bigger than a matchbox. "One note," he said. "For old times." He clicked. Nothing. Lila smiled like a storm bit its own tongue. "We pulled your RF board out of the Dyne-Tech unit at court," she said. "You can't sing to your toys tonight." Marrow's teeth flashed in something very far from mirth. "Then we'll play an older song." He moved fast for a man who believed in philosophy. He vaulted the rail to the barge and sprinted for the shoreward end where a pilot skiff was moored like an exit clause. Noah followed, boots slapping iron, breath tearing white ribbons into the gale. Emily's footfalls matched his. Kira hit the barge with a thump that rang the hull and made gulls lift cursing into the night. The skiff's engine coughed as Marrow yanked its starter. Twice. 3 times. He muttered a word that did not belong on a resume. On the 4th, it caught. The bow line skittered off the cleat. Noah didn't jump to the skiff. He jumped to the rope, 2 hands, all his weight, and let it yank his shoulder into a white flare of old pain. He flipped the line around the post and sat with it like a bad friend who needed hugging. The skiff jerked and stopped, engine snarling, Marrow pivoting to slash the rope with a knife that had folded more letters than bread. A baton struck his wrist before the knife found the right angle. Emily again, federal and furious. The knife skidded under the skiff seat. Marrow backhanded her with the other hand and moved for the throttle. He forgot about the dog. Kira hit him center mass. They went down in a tangle that was not metaphoric at all. Noah climbed into the skiff and took the throttle away the way you take scissors from a stubborn child. He stepped on the kill lanyard. The engine went dumb. Emily leaned on Marrow's shoulder, with all the professional boredom in the world, while she recited rites he had heard before and never believed applied to him. On the catwalk, marshals were already moving men and metal into positions that would later sound like logistics, but were, in the moment, a choir. Lila appeared at the rail, cheeks striped red by cold, eyes bright with the knowledge that code and bone had teamed up and chosen to be better than their inputs. Hawkins stood by the control box with his cuffed hands at his chest and the exact posture of a man who has decided which way gravity falls. He looked at Noah and smiled without showing teeth. Noah nodded once. Everything inside him that had been braced since the cedar loosened 1 notch. There wasn't much poetry in the hours that followed. Marshals did marshalling, paperwork got stapled to other paperwork until the pile weighed enough to count as law, and a federal cage opened its door to Silas Marrow with the practical dignity of public steel. In courtroom 3 the next morning, Judge Klein drank coffee like it might fend off the cold forever. Duarte moved through the calendar like a woman getting the dishes done so she could sit with someone she loved in a quiet kitchen. When Marrow's case was called, the room did that thing rooms do when everyone knows they are looking at something larger than its parts and agrees to pretend they aren't. Duarte outlined the spine in a voice that didn't ask permission. The mine, the warehouse, the sat phone routes, the neural unit, the ledger of names, the attempted erasure on the ridge, the barge. She didn't add adjectives. Truth had enough weight. Lila testified with the calm of a woman who had slept 2 hours and remembered that bread and water existed. She talked about hashes and tokens and missing packets with the clarity of a bell. Emily described a chain blown sideways, a hallway bleeding, a dog choosing to be bullet and bandage. The court reporter typed Kira with a capital K and didn't stop to wonder if dogs require honorifics. Hawkins took the stand last. Duarte didn't rush him. The blue behind his eyes was a tide now, moving but not in charge. He told the judge who had signed his paycheck when no one was supposed to, and which rooms had laughed when the word repurpose was used like a blessing. He told them how loyalty had been trained to be a lever, and how it had failed one night on a catwalk because a chain slipped and a dog sneezed and a man he remembered had said his name like it still belonged to him. Silence held the room when he finished, the useful kind, the kind that lets nails bite wood. Klein's pen ticked. He looked at Marrow. "You don't get to sail out of this one," he said. "Motion to detain is granted. We'll see your weather in open sky." The gavel sounded like a door being told what to do. A month later, because even miracles have paperwork, Noah stood on a different ridge watching a different kind of work. The sign over the chain link was plain and exactly right. North Star Canine Rescue. Below the letters, a painted star, a shepherd head silhouette, and a motto Lila insisted on: "Find the way, bring them home." Kira trotted across the yard with a limp that had downgraded itself to a memory. She wore a bright training vest and a look that said she was teaching a class she'd written. Beside her, a young vet named Danny ran a search lane with Luna, a sable shepherd with grief in her eyes and joy trying hard to catch up. Emily stood by the fence with a paper cup and the proud, bewildered look of someone who had discovered she liked Saturdays. Hawkins sat on a bench near the gate, hands free, scars honest. The blue was gone now. Consent had pushed it out. He checked in with his handler twice an hour and checked in with his own conscience more often. He wore a bracelet with an emergency number and a smile that looked like a man learning to understand the weather in his chest. Lila came out of the office carrying 2 mugs and a stack of intake forms. "We have a wait list," she said, sounding like a person who had decided to forgive the world for being complicated. Also, the grant came through. Duarte bullied a foundation and claimed it was networking. Noah took a mug and smiled into the steam. "Remind me to send her flowers she'll pretend to hate." "Already did," Lila said. She replied with a subpoena and a thank you. They watched Kira flag a scent, dig, freeze, and stare at Danny until he laughed and rewarded Luna for the find. The wind carried the clean smell of snow and sawdust and dogs. For the first time since the mountain, Noah's shoulders rested all the way down. "You ever think about after?" Lila asked, quiet enough the wind wouldn't overhear. "I used to not," he said. "Now I do. And after looks like this." He nodded at Kira, at Luna, at the yard, at Hawkins watching a dog teach a man to breathe. This is the room that's bigger than its parts. A raven crossed the sky, black on white, voice like a hinge. It sounded less like a lock and more like a door. Noah went down to the far gate and followed the trail under the spruces to the small clearing where the training field ended and the woods began. There, half buried in snow, stood a plaque he'd carved himself with hands that still shook sometimes, for the ones who find their way back and the ones who wait with a light. Kira joined him, leaned against his leg. He put his palm on the warm, stubborn line of her ribs and closed his eyes. He had been tied to a tree once and asked to let go. He hadn't. A dog had refused to let him. "Still here," he whispered to her, to the wind, to the men under the snow and the names on the ledger, and the judge who liked his coffee too strong. "Because you decided." Her tail thumped once. The sound was small. It was enough. The sun worked at the clouds, and a thin, honest blue opened between them. The kind of blue that remembers rivers know their way, that storms don't last, that the North Star doesn't shout. It just keeps being where it is so tired people can aim. Noah breathed. The breath stayed. Some stories need thunder. This one had snow and a dog and a quiet that finally didn't hurt. He let it be quiet. Some stories don't end. They simply find a quieter road. If this one reached you, if you felt the snow, the storm, and the heartbeat that refused to stop, then don't let it disappear. Subscribe to the North Star Stories, where every week we follow another light in the dark. Hit that bell, share it with someone who still believes in loyalty, in hope, in the sound of a dog finding home. Because somewhere out there, another story is waiting to be found.